Welcome to the Heart of Money podcast, where we discuss the impact that money has on every area of your life and where you can learn to make smarter money decisions. Join our conversation as we discuss our past experiences, talk about how to make better money management choices, and in the end, make a commitment to being weird. Hey folks, welcome back to the Heart of Money, episode 69. I'm your host, Austin Black, joined by my co-host, Bob Wesser, here in a few moments. And I'm really excited about this week's episode because of the very special guest we have on, Mrs. Julie Barbaro. Julie is a homeschooling mom of 6 children, a wife, certified life and marriage coach, and author of 2 children's books. Her passion is to empower couples to strengthen their mind and communication, overcome obstacles, and seek clarity. Together, she helps them create a life plan for themselves, as well as encouraging parents to guide their children to adulthood. She and her husband, Gino, live in St. Augustine, Florida, where they enjoy the old city and the simple beach life. And today's episode is going to be really fun, really insightful, because we're going to talk about the journey that Julie and her husband have taken from New York down to Florida, the financial decisions that they encountered, the struggles that they experienced, and most importantly, the joy and the fulfillment that they found within their marriage as a result of all of it. So I'm really excited to have her share her story, have her share her insight, and I know that you're going to love the honesty and the transparency that she shares today. So let's jump right into our conversation with Julie Barbaro. Hey folks, how would you like to learn the number one secret to winning with money in your marriage? Sounds pretty attractive, right? Well, there's a reason why most couples do not achieve financial success, and it comes down to 3 main areas that are problems in their marriage and with their money. If you want to find out what these 3 problems are and learn how to fix those, then sign up for the free training I have at freedommoneycoach.com/success guide. This video training is going to walk you through the 3 keys to getting on the same page with your spouse around money. It's called the Marriage and Success Guide, and I know that you're going to learn how you can actually start winning with money with your spouse, improving your money and your marriage all along the way. So head on over to freedommoneycoach.com/success guide, sign up for your free video training, and learn how to get on the same page with your spouse today. Well, Julia, so excited to have you on the show today. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Heart of Money, and welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me, Austin. This is super fun.
I am really excited for this conversation, and I say that on every guest episode that we have, but this is truly excited because you and I had a chance to visit a few weeks back, and you got just a very unique story about your life and your marriage and your finances and everything, and I wanted to get into that today. But before we jump into that whole conversation, for folks who don't know anything about you or about your company, about your family, just give us a little bit of background of who you are and what you're doing.
Sure. No, I'm happy to. My husband Gino and I, we've had a very long history. We've been married for 25 years. We do have 6 children, and it's been a very long journey for us. And I say that because people see us now and they think we've got it all together and everything's been great all along. But we really did struggle, just like every other couple in the world. And I just want to put that out there. But we did. I met my husband. He bought the restaurant that I worked at back, years ago. So when I saw him, he started working with his family. They bought it together. And I just loved the whole family concept of working together. And there was something beautiful about it. And I didn't know what my future was going to be like. I didn't know where we would end up 25 years later. But through that, we did get married. We started having children. And, I'm a homeschool mom of 6. So that means I'm home a lot, busy with the kids. And I noticed throughout the years that he would really struggle with money. We had a different background. We had a different view of money in general. We didn't know that. Our communication wasn't really that great. And so there was just, some stress in our relationship because of it. He had this view. I'm sure we'll talk a lot about this, so I won't even go into it yet. But that was a cause for many issues as the year went on, of the view of money. And that's something to talk about with your spouse. But over the years, the restaurant didn't do as well as it used to. So he started to do a little bit of real estate on the side. I saw, because I was, maybe it's a woman's intuition, but I did see a lot of stress. He would come home stressed. He'd come home really frustrated, very defeated in the restaurant world. And he really needed an out. And so this is where, our communication wasn't the greatest, but my awareness was excellent. And so I noticed that he really needed something different. And one day he came home. He's like, what if I sell the restaurant? We moved to Florida and I do real estate. And now this is it was a big question. It was a big question.
Yeah.
But in my view of him, I mean, the only thing I could say is, am I putting my husband first here? Because everything in my head was like, no way, I'm not leaving my family, not leaving my friends, my everything familiar to me. But in that, I realized that he needed this, and I said, of course. And so that was our journey down to Florida, and great things has happened since then. And I know it was a lot to do with our communication that opened up a little bit, and we became very close, and our family became closer, and understanding his views of certain things such as finance were revealed, which they never were before. And so that's where we are now. My husband has this incredible company called Jake and Gino. He teaches people how to buy multifamily apartments. And what do I have to do with that? A lot, but at the same time, I don't know anything about real estate, which is
Yeah.
interesting. But it was the reason of, I had the family side of it, and other people craved, how do you do it? Like, how do you support each other? How do you raise a family and bring your kids to all these events and support him and work with him, but not know anything about real estate? And so that's where we are now, is where we coach people on happy marriages, happy families, how to do it all, how to talk to each other, how to communicate, because it's all part of it. If your business life is succeeding, but your home life is suffering, what's the point? And so we try to balance those two.
Yeah, that's such an incredible story. And, as we had a chance to visit before, one of the things that really stuck out to me, and I'm excited to have you share about it, the dynamics that occurred when you guys were up in the northern part of the country there before you moved. And you had a lot of, I mean, you might call it sacrifice, because you say, you want to make sure that your husband was taken care of, and he kind of became first. And moving, all the way down to Florida is a really, really big decision to make, but you just went along with it, even though I think you said you were kind of scared. Tell me a little bit of how that whole life event came to be, and what that was like, making that decision with him amidst your fears that you experienced.
Yeah, I mean, fears like you wouldn't believe, and I've talked to many people about that, because we're so comfortable where we are. Whether even if it's a difficult time, we're comfortable. It's familiar. Even if it's a tough time, it's familiar. And so the other side to that, it's unfamiliar and it's scary, and we don't know what that looks like. So a lot of times we just literally will stay where we are. And when he asked me to move, oh, the thought in my head was just, it was interesting, because there's this moment of, what if we sell the restaurant and move to Florida and I do real estate? And my thought process was incredible. It felt like there was 10 minutes in there thinking about, what about everybody else? What about me? What about the kids? What are they going to be happy there? We don't know anybody there. That means we have to literally pick everything up that we have here, go to a foreign place, find new friends, find new doctors, find new, just any event that we do, anything the kids do. We homeschooled, yes, but we had friends up there. And so I was literally putting everyone first. And it was amazing. What I thought was like, wow, okay, now I'm putting my kids' friends first. I'm putting them ahead of my husband, who should be my rock, the person that I communicate with, that I do anything for. And I was putting him first in every other decision in our life. Because when, I always say that, and people get like, oh, but what about you? My husband puts me first too. And when you both put each other first, it is a great marriage. That's just something I have to say. But it does take a lot of courage. It does take a lot of courage to say yes to something like this, because we don't know what it was going to be like. And I said to him, yes. I said, of course we'll go. And then we had to figure it out from there, because we didn't have the answers. Everyone's like, well, what are you going to do? And I'm like, we don't know. And I looked at it as a journey together. This is the next part of our life. We don't know what I mean, obviously my husband was very good at preparing financially. I never had to worry, because I always had that trust. I didn't think he was just going to come down to Florida and hang out on the beach. I knew he was going to provide for us, because that was a
Yeah.
trust that we had. And I think that's important. A lot of times we're like, well, we're going to move down, and what are you going to do? And we're fearful that we're not going to make money. But that's something I knew because he always educated himself. That was one thing that I always saw when he was transitioning from restaurant to business and real estate. He was coming home, buying books, educating himself, getting courses. He wasn't coming home watching football and hanging out with the bars with the guys. He literally
Yeah.
was doing something. And I saw that. And it's really important that a lot of you out there, guys that are listening, if you're trying to change something and you're desperately asking your wife for their blessing or their, show them. You can talk all you want, but we have to show each other that we are doing this for the family, for each other. And it wasn't an easy move. Let me tell you, it was really difficult. We just talked about it yesterday. I mean, my kids were devastated. We literally were devastated for a very long time, and it took a couple of years for us to be like, okay, we're home.
Yeah.
So it's a long struggle, and but it's a sacrifice that we have to make.
Yeah, and your comment there about, the action has to be there. You can't just say that you're supporting, you're excited, but you have to have actual things happen that indicate that. I think that's probably that is the harder thing to do than saying that your agreement with is actually acting in agreement. And I know there's a lot to be said for someone who can, in that devastated moment, still be actually supported and go along with that process. Bobby, anything that's jumping out at you? Because I know there's a couple things that really kind of speak to the financial side of this that I want to get into, but this is kind of your first chance to hear the story. What's jumping out to you so far?
Well, I think the idea of first being devastated, moving from one place to another and taking a few years to get used to the new surroundings. I think a lot of people don't realize that when they make a move, that it takes some time to finally get into a place where you feel like you're at home. And something that you said early on was you made the decision and then you kind of made it up as you went. At least that's what I heard. And so for you to say, yeah, we started moving in this direction. One, what prompted him to go to or think that Florida was a place, and how much planning had he done prior to a discussion? Because I know, coming from my perspective, I would know where I wanted to go and why I wanted to go there, and I would have everything lined out before I even had the conversation with my wife. And that gets me in trouble because then I don't tell her all the things that I should because it's already happened in my head I don't know how many times. So
As we learned about last week on the show.
Yes. One of the big topics of our show is don't do what Bob did. That's why he's here. From the conversation you had with your husband, how much did he have pre-planned forethought before he talked to you about it? Or was it something like he had this idea that he threw a dart at the board and Florida was it, and we're going and we're going to figure this out as we go?
Sure. It was, well, first of all, he always loved the beach. The beach to him, we used to come down to Florida. And so that was the big plus. But politics played a role. Taxes played a role. All of the financial reasons played a role. We have freedoms down here that New York does not have. And so that was a big reason for it. But his whole thing, so it's funny because my thought process, and I'm sure yours and my husband's are very different. His is all financial. How are we going to support? How are we going to make the money? And mine is, who are we going to see? How are we going to make friends, but family feel, you know what I mean? How are the kids going to be feeling at home? And so it's interesting how our brains work like that. And that's where I'm coming from, is because I didn't have one worry. I did, and I'll tell you in a second, but I didn't have one worry because I knew he was slowly planning it in a sense. It was slowly leaving the restaurant because the money wasn't there. And as he was doing that, he was buying real estate. He was buying apartment buildings with his new business partner, Jake. And so that, when I said, okay, but can this support us? And he's like, we will have a simple life, he said, but it will be down in Florida. It'll be, and I said, let's go. He needed a separation too. And I think that's important. There's a long story behind this, but it's a family decision. He worked with his mom. He worked with his brother. He also needed a separation from them. And I don't mean it in any disrespect at all. He needed that. And I knew that for many, many years, but I didn't know I didn't even know, both of us, we didn't even understand that, wow, we can leave if we want. we can actually move away if we want to. That wasn't even an option in our head. I'm like, who lives in Florida? Like, isn't that for vacation? Who lives down here? And so here we are. But there was one moment where I remember the house was packed. It did take us 2 years. I want to go there for a second, because this wasn't a decision that we made. He came home late one night from the restaurant. It was winter. It was cold. He came home. I mean, he was filthy. His restaurant clothes were dirty. He just was defeated. And I saw that, and there was compassion, because a lot of times we get irritated at each other. But if we look past that and we're like, why is my husband acting like this? Why is he feeling this way? All of a sudden you have compassion for that person.
Mm-hmm.
And there was more to it, because I trusted him, and we have a lot of faith in God. And I said, God, if you want us to move, this is going to happen. But it literally took us 2 years, and it wasn't an easy 2 years. We would come down to Florida for 3 months, try it out. And every time we left, everyone we left up New York, it was like we were all dying. Like they thought they would never see us again. And so when I say devastating, it was a new level of devastation. But we would come back, and then we would go down again. And the one time I said, I kind of worried. I said to my husband, I said, okay, I just need a backup plan. If you don't support us, as far as we have 6 children, they eat a lot. They eat really good food. They're all Italian, so we cook a lot. I said, our backup plan is to move in with your mom. I just want you to know that that's where we're going to end up if this doesn't work out. And so when I said that, I saw his face, and I knew that we would succeed. I knew it was going to be fine, because I knew that he would do anything he could to support his family. I trusted him, and I put that faith, and I said, whatever you need to do, I'm here to support you. And it was one of those moments again, that it's so tempting at times to say, look, we're upset. Look, it's not working out. But it's that relationship that we have to work on, and to realize that we're in this together. We're a team. We're not playing against each other. We're not in competition, and so there are moments where I was, not happy in a sense, but I knew it would go away. I knew time would change that. And it did. And we openly talked about it. And there were moments where he wasn't like, what did we do? But it's one of those things. It's a journey. It's like the next step of your journey.
I love that there's so many differences in what you share, just in your personalities, in your thought process, in your emotions, and yet there's so much that you guys are unified in. I think that's a true testament to what we're going to talk about here today, as we look at just your financial elements and views and everything. But I want to point that out, because I think it's really easy for us to feel like our spouse thinks so much different than us, acts so much different than us, it responds differently than us, that you cannot get on the same page. And the fact is that that's not true, right? There's always some level of true unity and harmony, and especially if both people make a conscious effort to find that, it's always there. So I think that's a really important piece of this, is even though there was so much difference and so much separation in what you guys were choosing, desiring, feeling, experiencing, yet you were still in it together no matter what, and really supporting each other's strengths and weaknesses and fears amongst all of that. I want you to walk me through some of you mentioned early on, the financial views that you guys had, and how there was kind of a drastic contrast in that, but yet it still worked in a positive manner. Share what happened there with the finances, and what led to all that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I grew up in a very Catholic, Irish Catholic family, and so money was, if you know a lot of those families, money, it's not that it was technically evil. I don't want to use that word, but it was, you didn't need it to be happy.
Mm-hmm.
My mom would make a lot of money and then just somehow give it away or push it away, even though, you know what I mean? And so my husband grew up in an Italian home where they worked in the restaurant field, and they always saved their money. They were very diligent. They would buy assets. They would buy apartment buildings. They'd buy houses and rent them out and make more income. And so we had a very different upbringing. And I think that's really important, because when a lot of people get married, all of a sudden they're like, oh, my wife spends money like crazy, and I'm trying to save it. And a lot of times we just start there. We start our relationship right there, and we move forward, and we never just get irritated. Like, why are they spending money? And so I this is something that took probably a good 20 years for us to have the conversation of what your life was like growing up with money. Where did your view come from? Because a lot of times we don't even look at that. Like, how did you get these views to begin with? Like, where do they come
Mm-hmm.
from? Because I was always like, well, in my view, and to my husband, was he's thinking money brings happiness. And I was like, no, we didn't have money growing up and I was happy. So therefore, you don't need money for happiness. And so there was a disconnect on both of our parts. I remember I was literally in labor. We were with our first child, and my husband's flipping out because I'm buying organic milk and how expensive it was, and how is he going to pay for college? And that was his
Mm-hmm.
worry, like
Yeah.
verbally telling my stepmom at the time. And she's dying laughing. She's like, he was so scared. Like, how are you going to pay for college for this little girl who wasn't even born yet? you know, and wow, how time has changed. And I just think that's the difference, in my situation between the husband and the wife is I'm thinking about nurture and he's thinking, how am I going to support this family? And it's amazing when we stop and think about that and respect each side of it, because there always are two sides of it. And we
Mm-hmm.
can nag and we can bother, you guys all the time. And it's easy to do for us. But if we just step back and say, okay, what's the view of money and how to bring it together? And so now we have a different, my husband always used, since he's been in real estate, he always uses these words for financial freedom. And again, it would irritate me because I'm like, what are you saying that once you're financially free, you're going to be happy? And that was
Mm-hmm.
an ongoing conversation for quite a while until he said, listen, and this is super helpful, is that he spoke in my language. He spoke to me how I would understand. And I think that's a mistake on our part many times, is we explain something the way we understand or the way it makes
Mm-hmm.
sense to us, and the other person leaves the conversation assuming, we were like, oh yeah, I told you, but didn't understand. And so many, many years he just talked about financial freedom and how, we're going to be happy because of this. And so again, financial freedom equals happiness. I'm like, no, that's not true. But he said, listen, when we are financially free, guess what we can do? It's an experience we can give the kids, myself. We would fly my mom down. We actually helped her move down to Florida because we could financially do it. We would have my kids' friends come down. We bring them to Disney for the day. I mean, the experience that we could give other people. We just had a fundraiser for 300 people, and we paid for the whole thing and just donated the money somewhere else to my
Oh,
daughter's a
wow.
missionary, so we donated it to them. And like my husband's like, we could have never have done that unless we were financially free. And I was like, oh, I said, you should have just explained it to me that way years ago. And then we would have saved for, but he didn't know that at the time. And I didn't know that at the time. And a lot of times we have to go through these difficult moments, especially in our marriage, to get to where we are. Don't have regrets. Oh, I should have said this to you back then. If we knew all these things in the beginning, I don't know, we're kind of missing out on some really good years. Yes, they're
Yeah.
difficult, but that's where we get our wisdom from. That's where we get our story from. That's how we can help other people, is we had to go through the difficult times in order to, make an impact. And so we should embrace those hard times.
Definitely. Bob.
See, you left Austin speechless. He didn't know where to go from there. You made the comment early on with just being uncomfortable, and the first thing I thought of was Moses and the whole
Mm,
idea of, slavery in Egypt it wasn't comfortable, but it was what they were used to, and
mm-hmm.
striking out to a completely foreign place and trusting that God's in it is a major part of that, and
Yeah.
just knowing that there's more to the story than just what we see and what we think we're going to experience. And on a different perspective, my wife and I are getting better. We aren't at the 20-year mark, but we're getting better at communicating through our finances and our budgeting. And Austin and I and our wives have joined a conversation where we've talked about how we spend differently and how we budget. And my wife and I have separate budgets, but then we come together for budget meetings, and those are happening more frequently. And we're really becoming closer as a couple as we're doing that, and really doing a better job of speaking and understanding each other. And it's taken a while to get us here, but some of our habits are changing, some of them still where they were, and they'll continue to evolve. But I've really enjoyed how it's changed and how I've learned more, just on how my wife perceives things and how I perceive, and then being able to see the other side, like you mentioned, just through having those conversations on a regular basis.
Yeah, having conversations. A lot of times we're afraid to have certain conversations, and a lot of it is money. We're afraid. And I remember my husband came home. Again, this was about 7 years of difficult times with money, and no one knew. Nobody in our whole family knew that we were struggling with money. We had this beautiful big house. We'd have parties all the time. And I remember he came home. He said, we're just not doing well. We need to cut back. And I said, okay. And we cut back. And everyone's like, you're having a party this weekend? I'm like, no, we have things to do. I didn't really get into the details. But again, it is the communication, I think, that lacks a lot of times, because sometimes we're afraid to say that we're having difficulty with finances, because and again, I'm speaking for my husband when I say this, because I know I always would stress about the kids and taking care of them, and the stress behind that, and the lack of sleeping, and then am I doing a good job? And it took me quite a long time to realize that he stresses at a different level for being able to literally financially support us. And he never really complained about it. And I never really thought about it because we didn't talk about it. I didn't understand that he worried about, like, the reason why he was worrying about our Gabriella's college when I was in labor, because he was thinking, how am I going to support this new family that I have? And that was a major fear that he had, that we would just kind of laugh how silly that is. But I have no idea what that feels like, to be a man trying to support a family. Like, I don't know that fear. And I just can see it from my husband. He can explain it to me as many times as he wants, but I will never actually understand what that feels like. And I think it's important, because a lot of times we're like, well, what about me? What about my feelings? Yes, my husband will never understand what it's like to birth a child, or to have a little people at home, because he didn't do it. He literally was working. But that communication is so important. And a lot of times we don't even know what we were trying to say. A lot of times we don't even know what we think about our finances. We don't know how we feel about it. And so when Gino said, listen, I need you to cut back, I didn't know what that meant. I didn't understand, because that communication just stunk at that time. And it took for him to go to life coach. He went to a life coach school, and it was the listening portion that he had come home from. And again, we were on 5 children at the time, married for, who knows, maybe 15 years. And he sat me on the couch and he asked me these questions. And one of them was a financial question. And then he just sat and listened and looked at me. And I said, what's happened? Like, what? I was so uncomfortable. I'm like, what? What? I said, was there something wrong? And he's like, no, I'm really just listening. And I thought, wow, I don't think we spend enough time listening to each other. I think we talk a lot. We say what we want to say. And then as the other person's talking, we actually think what we're going to be saying next time. And so the listening of actually shutting out all the devices, all their distractions, even our own thoughts, and just literally watching the person talk and listen, and seeing their fears, and seeing, their excitements or their worries, all of that you can see if you just pay attention to the other side. And I think that's lacking in marriages these days. And we forget, because we have so many distractions. And if the finances come up and there's fear behind the person's eyes, we should notice that, especially as the wife. We should see that and say, okay, what can I do to help? How do you need me to help? I want to do something. And then reach out our hand and say, what can we do? Because like you said, we're in this together. We're on the same team.
It's such a common dynamic that I see with a lot of people. And I think that this conversation today just kind of puts a spotlight on that element, because not only do we have difficulty with conversation and with communication and with understanding and with terminology and all the stuff that you talked about. I mean, it is so common for us to be married to someone and yet be so different from them and yet still be the same, be together with that person. And I love the sentiments that you shared about your husband and just the actions that he took, the change that kind of took place, and then your attempt to understand his fears and hesitations, because a lot of times we're so focused in our own thought process and our own emotions. It's challenging to step outside of that and try to relate and try to understand where our spouse is coming from. And that's one of the things that I talk about so much in the early parts of my coaching program is you have to be able to understand your spouse almost more than you understand yourself. Otherwise, you just cannot come together. You cannot have that communication. You cannot have that unified dynamic in your marriage to where no matter what happens and no matter who's afraid of what, you still are there as a couple working on it together as a team. So I love all those different little nuances that you shared, because that just brings to light stuff that no one really knows about, wants to talk about, understands, appreciates, but it is the case in every single relationship and every single marriage. One thing that I want you to dig into is a little bit more for me. Let's go back several minutes here, but you mentioned that the words financial freedom were something that you and your husband had kind of differing opinions and perspectives on. And the fact that the experience element was something that you could really grab a hold of and understand that. What was his definition of financial freedom, and how, once you guys each understood what that meant for you, how did you support one another in accomplishing that for both of you?
Yeah, that's a really good question. To him, financial freedom was to buy apartment buildings, to get assets, to build his portfolio, and to basically have something for the children later on when they grow up. So they have something, a legacy of his that he can pass off to the children and so on. And I appreciate that 100%. That's one thing that his dad did for him. And then going back, grandparents and also, so they would always have something for the grandkids to pass. And in my Irish family, it was, you basically live off what you made, and that was it. And so I didn't understand that concept. And again, my view was, well, why not just have my kids work and they make their own money? Like, why, I don't, because then in my view is like, okay, well, what about those spoiled kids that we know that don't work and they just, and you're like, Julia, there's more to it. It's the work ethic we're also teaching them at the same time. I was just looking at the money. I wasn't looking at the whole picture. I wasn't looking at my kids are learning to work with my husband. They're learning to work with us. We're teaching them a whole work ethic that maybe those spoiled kids didn't have because they didn't work. They just took the dad's money. And that was my worry. Well, what? I'm not going to, you're not going to be teaching them. And so again, I had to take away my view, my negative view of what that financial freedom was. And I had to say, okay, what is really going on here? And this was a conversation that we had because I didn't even know what I thought. So a lot of times we ask a question to like our spouse or whatever, and it's so hard to explain because we don't even know what we're thinking. We don't even know what that means. Like what the financial freedom to me, I didn't know what that meant because all I knew was my view of his view, which is very different than what he thought it was. And so he spoke in my language, again, differently than what he understood. He said, no, we're teaching them the full picture of how to have he's like, you're teaching the kids awareness, how to have awareness with each other, how to communicate about relationships, about taking care of the home, about all those things that I learned, that I know that I'm teaching my children. He's like, and I'm teaching them the other side of it because there's two sides. And there has to be a balance in there. And there has to be, obviously, you teach the kids about charity, about sacrifice. All of that goes together. And it's a whole. So that financial freedom is a whole. He always knew my side of it, but he didn't know the fear part of it. The worry of the fact that, well, if we have a lot of money, then we're just going to be, buying things out of our happiness. And that's going to bring us happiness. And I knew that wasn't the case. But why not be happy? Why not be joyful? Why not be grateful for what we have? and also do amazing things with it and help people that we normally would never have ever been able to help. I mean, I coach people all the time. I don't charge them because I just literally want to help them. I don't need to get an income. So I do what I can when I can. You know, my daughter, like I said, is a missionary. She has all these missionaries. They just left this morning for the weekend. And we were able to host them two weekends in a row. And I mean, give them the experience of feeling at home, of making dinner for them. I know that sounds little to some people, but we are, Italian family. We go all out. It's the prosciutto, there's the mozzarella, it's the top of the line stuff, because we can do it. And, and so that it's a bigger picture now that I see it. And I'm thankful for my husband for his patience in me, because, a lot of us just want the other person to understand right now. I talk to you about it, understand it, but it does take time. It does take time. And I think that's part of the relationship is learning about each other over time and learning about each other again over time, because we change so much. And a lot of times, we're like, oh, I knew you 20 years ago. We're busy with the kids. And this was a mistake on my part too, is that we didn't relearn about each other, because we changed so much, right? We're so different than when we first met. And so we need to take that time and that effort and put into how have we changed. You mentioned being on the same page, which always makes me laugh, because I always say my husband and I usually are in the same book. The same book. He's usually
Right.
like 5 chapters ahead, running. And I'm just like, I just need a break. Hold on. But as long as we are familiar where we are, and we're in that same book, that life book, it's just a big journey. And I'm so thankful that, just a little something about me. One of my biggest fears in the world, out of all things, was speaking to anyone. I terrified, 100% terrified. And through my husband's new company, Jake and Gino, and all the amazing people, he's very soft spoken. He's a really good guy. And a lot of good people are attracted to that, and they want to learn from just an honest person. We've gotten a lot of really great families joining, just learning about real estate. But through that, it's the family life that they're really desperate about learning about even more. And how do we communicate, and how do we work together? And so I was like, how am I giving this? How am I giving back? How am I making an impact when I'm just literally standing in the corner, not talking to anybody? And so I'm like, to my husband, I'm like, let's just start a podcast, like terrified. You know what I mean? And so that's what I feel like we do as a couple, is we take our fears and we're like, how are we going to do this together? How are we going to overcome this together to make an impact to other people, with other people? Because why else, what's the point? We have an incredible marriage, but if we can't share that with other people, what are we doing?
Man, this is beautiful. I love the honesty and the transparency that you're bringing today, because it's, again, just one of the things about this show is we love to talk about stuff that we aren't normally going to talk about, and I feel like this conversation is a perfect example of that. So I cannot thank you enough just for the tremendous insight that you shared with us this far. Bob, I know there's a lot of gold that was just shared there. What jumped out to you for this?
It's humorous to say you were in the same book. That makes a lot of sense. We try to be on the same page. I'm not sure who's where in the book if we're going through a whole book. So I think the ability to be able to share with other people and go through things together, I think that in itself is very cool. And I'm glad that Austin got a little teary-eyed there. I could see it. And, but just being able to share that and to be able to, come from the heart with that material and share it together and push through it together. I'm also a little surprised that you have a husband that's Italian and soft-spoken. It's not really something I'm particularly used to when I think of Italian. So,
Okay, time out. Let's just clarify. You're right. I'm sorry. He's soft spoken in a loving way, but if you are on our podcast, it gets pretty heated. It's hysterical. He uses his hands. I mean, he just goes. So you're right. I for some reason I say that, and people do get confused, and I forget about the other side to him, and it is that fun, feisty Italian that just has to. I say we're not in competition, but he loves to compete. So yes, there's that other side.
Oh man. Well, there is so much wisdom that's been shared today, and so much insight. And again, I love the transparency that you brought forth and sharing. What you've experienced, what you've gone through, what you've learned, the challenges, the victories. Very inspiring on just how we can really support and love our spouse at a whole new level. No matter what we are afraid of, no matter what we are scared by, knowing that we are each other's rock, that even if we have different financial views, we can work to understand those, we can work to support those, because the honest reality is, if we were not different, we would be annoying each other because we were too similar. So that's something that we always have to keep in mind, is there's going to be difference there, and you can either embrace it or you can walk away from it. And I think embracing those differences, as you have, I think, witnessed and shared, is what really creates a strong marriage, a strong family, a strong financial freedom opportunity that just cannot be found without the hard work and the pain and just the energy that it takes to accomplish that. So cannot thank you enough for sharing all those wonderful stories and pieces of wisdom. I know one of the things that I really like to have guests do is to share one piece of insight that listeners can take and grab hold of from your experience on how they can impact their own life as a couple with their money.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that awareness, I'm a very faithful person. And so my prayer every morning, honestly, at this point in my life is, God, where do you want me today? Like, what do you want me to do today? Because half the time we're through my experience, I'm telling God what I want. This is what I want to see. This is what, you know what I mean? And it's, I feel like sometimes it's selfish, but I've just kind of surrender that, and just wherever you want to take me is where I'm going to go. And marriage is the thing that's really been, for some reason, on the forefront. And I'm not even talking about our marriage. I'm talking about like impacting other people's. And that's where I'm going with that. And so I think the first question that I like to ask other people or just ourselves is, where is my marriage going well? Like, what's going amazing about it? What do I want to see happen in the future? Because a lot of times we're afraid. I know that sounds silly because we've been married for so long, but we're afraid to say, hey, listen, remember it used to be like this. Remember we used to do these things and we stopped. Maybe we have children, and we do neglect each other when we have children. It's hard to figure everything out at the same time,
Right.
But where in our marriage needs work? Because why wouldn't we work on it? We work out, we eat well, we do all these things, self-awareness and all this stuff, but we don't put our spouse, we don't put them first. So how am I putting my spouse first? And how am I asking, here's what I'm looking for from you? Because a lot of times we don't even communicate that to each other, is what I'm missing. It would be really nice, if we could just sit on the porch and drink coffee in the morning. Just something so basic like that. We forget that it's sometimes the little things in our marriage that are lacking, but we can ask for them. We can notice our husband maybe once in a while, or a wife, and say something. Hey, I noticed how you were playing with the kids last night. It was really beautiful. I just wanted you to know that. Just acknowledge each other again. Because a lot of times it's just those simple things that we forget to do because we're comfortable with each other. And we know that they're there. And so we slowly, and I don't want to use the word neglect, but I guess that's the only word I can think of, but we slowly neglect them, and we let that just build up over the years. And then all of a sudden we're distant, we don't know each other, and we complain. Just little by little, step by step, we can get closer again. Because once we do that, oh my gosh, it's amazing. Like our marriage it's just unbelievable. And then we're that example for our children, we're that example for other people. But it just takes one little step every day. Keep it simple.
It's incredible. Very, very well said. And And it goes back to conversations that Bob and I have had before on this exact topic, just those small pieces that you can do every day, whether it's with your money or your marriage or your job, whatever it is. Those little commitments can add up to a huge difference. So absolutely agree with that. Where can folks connect with you, find out more about Jake and Gino? I know you got a couple of books for kids. Where can folks follow you and learn more from you?
Sure. You can visit juliaandgino.com. And you can check out, we have two kids books at the moment. It's basically three characters, something bad happens, and they have to figure out, there's different paths we could take. A lot of times it's always, one path, we have to make a decision, but there's different things that we could do. The second book, one of them is called The Cannolis Exploded. The second book is a Gelato Blast, and it talks about the importance of mentorship. Who we're getting mentored from, who we're surrounding ourselves with, because these are really important questions that we ask our children, but also as adults. I kind of wrote the kids book for the kids, but also for the parents, because who are we spending time with? It really does make a difference. And it's just a comical book of just silly stuff that happens, and just something that we could talk with our children about responsibility, because I think that's something that we forget to talk about sometimes. We're just busy with life. But you can check that out on juliaandgino.com. You can always check out our podcast, which we talk about business and family. If you go to jakeandgino.com, you can check out the podcast, and it's called The Julia and Gino Show. You can always email me, juliabarbaro@gmail.com. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram and Facebook.
Awesome. Well, Bob, any final comments from you before I sign us off?
I like the Cannoli Exploded. And are you saying it's a choose your own adventure or choose your own decision type book? Is that?
Well, it just goes down the paths of each of the characters,
okay,
and how different they are. So we have a responsible rhino, we have a pity party pig, and a creative caterpillar, and they all choose completely different decisions. The pity party, obviously, he's always complaining. I can't believe this happened. He goes out and buys TV, and he binge watches TV. As responsible rhino, literally gets his resume together. He does more education. You know what I mean? So it shows, and then the creative caterpillar does something unique and tries to come up with more entrepreneurial type thing. And so it just shows that there are different paths you can take when something bad happens. Yeah. Which again, obviously gelato and cannolis, you can't go wrong with that. but it's a fun book to just start conversations with the kids. And I'll send you guys a couple of each, because they're really good books.
Thank you.
No,
awesome.
Really, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, Julie, it's been a fantastic conversation, and I cannot thank you enough for coming on the show today, for sharing your story, for sharing just your honest experiences. And I don't know about Bob, I know I've been inspired to go love my wife some more and support her and try to continue our marriage in that strong path. So thank you so much for being on the show today with us. We enjoyed it a lot.
Awesome. Thank you, Bob. Thank you. This has been awesome. I love this whole conversation, because I just want to first of all, thank you too, because we do need strong men in the world. And I'm just so thankful to be on your podcast, embracing that, because I always tell my husband we're on a podcast, we need you guys in the world to make a difference. And we're so thankful for you. So thank you.
Absolutely.